And as for the television's so-called plan, Batman has no jurisdiction. He'll find him and make him squeal. I know the squealers when I see them.
Look,
And
what are you saying about my personality?
All right. Yeah, we're live. Okay.
All right, we're live.
Yeah, we are live.
Okay, well,
Welcome back to Red Star Radio. This is O'Neill, and I have my associate Lee Chen here.
Bernie won.
Bernie won, unofficially, officially. Or he won and just destroyed the DNC.
Yes, big dick energy this week from the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Big dick energy, but what the fuck even happened?
Well, I mean,
This is...
pretty obvious what happened.
Yeah.
They tried to fuck the election.
But I mean, I think this is the best outcome and also the worst outcome, because we know that the corruption is so evident in the DNC, and they're active, not actively, but passively trying to rig the election. And the entire establishment is against Bernie.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's so overt and it's so in our faces that there's no questioning it now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. You know, Iowa, they've really just shown that, like, oh, God, like, we can't let Bernie win. We can't let this be, you know, a basically like a coronation for Bernie, right? So what we're going to do is instead we're going to burn down the entire Iowa caucus, stop anything from happening, destroy the establishment just to stop Bernie from having his crowning moment, right? But what happened, for those who weren't following, was that the Iowa caucus reported that they don't know how many people voted for what. For accuracy reasons, they're going to do a slow count and slowly release the numbers as counting.
I think Troy Price came out with the results and said that Pete Buttigieg won, or Buttigieg.
Yes. Well, Pete Buttigieg,
or the lying fucking rat fucking dick shit.
Pete Buttigieg
traitor.
won one more standard delegate electorate, or state delegate electorate, whatever the fuck it's called. One more SDE, which doesn't actually matter. All that matters is the total number of state delegates that gets counted.
Well, the biggest thing with Iowa is the Iowa boost, which is the popularity increase in the polling that you get after you win Iowa. It's starting off the election or the race on a good start for the primaries. Yeah. So it's not necessarily important because Iowa only has 2% of the delegates for the DNC.
Only 1% actually.
Only 1% of the total delegates.
Even less.
So it's more of a PR opportunity with free press.
But
it's twofolded, because if you, or at least at this outcome, because you got those 3 days of free press. Buttigieg did, and then it came out that the whole Iowa caucus was fucked up, and none of the votes are even legitimate anymore.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing that Buttigieg got. But then Bernie Sanders just
big dick energy.
Yeah,
Bernie
big dick
Sanders.
energy.
Dude, I love the fact that the DNC said, "Oh, we don't know how many people actually voted for what," and then the Bernie Sanders campaign fucking boom whipped out their dick and was like, "Listen, we had agents at every single caucus,
and we have our
location.
own app,
Yeah.
and we have our own independent caucus. We're prepared now, you assholes."
Yep, we prepared for it. We got 6,000 more votes than you. Fuck you.
Mm-hmm. And then, was it last night or
last night? They finally
Wednesday night. No, Bernie Sanders' campaign came out last night with 14 different districts that had inaccuracies or discrepancies, and they had it listed and itemized, like number for number.
Yep, I saw that.
Of course, big shout out to all the independent researchers on Twitter and people running scripts through all of the data. Because without them, I don't think anyone really would have noticed in time. Because just thousands and thousands of Bernie supporters all flocking on social media to the results and pointing out all of these little discrepancies that No other campaign really has this momentum
Or
behind
wants
it.
to do it.
Yeah, because none of Pete supporters were doing this. But it just proves and goes to show that the Bernie campaign is not necessarily a campaign, but it's not even a movement. It's a revolution.
It's a revolution.
Bernie Sanders is only one of many in this movement.
Yeah. And I think, however, I don't want to get like too bogged down in the details, because that's what the opposition wants. They want us to get into the details so they can say like, well, technically, Pete Buttigieg won one more standard delegate.
Well, technically, the entire election is null and void, because even AP and the New York Times won't report on this.
Yes.
Because there's too many inaccuracies and discrepancies with the caucus.
Well, you know what?
And not to mention,
they're just going
what
to
do you
say Pete won. That's all they're going to say. They're not going to look into the details. They're just going to say Pete won.
Yeah, but it's that boost too. Like the New York Times won't come out and say Pete won, because even their election needle had discrepancies too. Their needle that said Pete was going to win 100% on Tuesday, it wasn't even factoring the satellite caucuses.
Yep.
And then they went down into the data, and Noah something. He's a reporter on he was one of the reporters on the caucus for the New York Times. He was in the threads where people were running scripts through the data, looking at whether candidates were valid or not, and whether they won the second vote.
Yes.
Yeah, the second. I forget. I've been doing this for looking at it for 3 days. But yeah, he was in the threads, and he's like, "Yeah, there are many inaccuracies, and it's too early to call, and I won't make any judgment on this because the entire election, just all the votes and the records are incomplete."
Yes. Although, you know what I love is reading all of the on the Pete Buttigieg for President subreddit. All of his supporters are raging because. And they're calling Bernie Sanders supporters a bunch of rats because Bernie Sanders won off of the satellite caucuses. That's what really brought the race, to such an even match, was from the satellites. And Pete basically said,
well, I mean, an even match
one supporter basically said, these fucking Bernie Sanders is so corrupt because he managed to get votes from a place that no one even knew existed. This is such bullshit.
Yeah, but
they're rigging the election.
Even those votes are in relation to the entire caucus in general, which, for all intents and purposes, the motive behind this total incompetence behind recording the votes points towards cronyism and corruption.
Yeah.
So we're looking at extra votes that no one was really aware of in a whole that is null and void.
Yes.
That Pete Buttigieg is building his base and support off of in his polling numbers.
But let's go back to just the bare bones basics.
Well, and
who actually won the caucus?
Yeah, who won the caucus?
Bernie Sanders got the popular vote.
Yeah, according to whom, though? CNN says Pete Buttigieg won because of the SDE.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders says he won because of the popular vote.
Yes.
But
here's the thing. SDEs don't matter.
Yeah.
SDEs
I consider it, I declare the winner, both of them.
Yeah. I don't even argue about the SDEs.
No, the winner was Trump.
No.
Trump said he was the winner.
I don't argue about over the SDEs. SDEs don't matter. SDEs are merely the county level delegates who go on to vote for who wants to become the state delegates. Who the state delegates will support. And Bernie and Pete ended up with the same number of state delegates.
Yeah.
But Bernie got more votes.
And it's a threefold question. So Sanders got more votes, and he proved that he's more electable than billionaire Pete.
Who is more electable? Bernie.
And then Pete won because he got that PR boost from his NBC interview on Monday and his 15% polling increase in New Hampshire on Tuesday.
Yes.
And then Trump won because the DNC shot themselves in the foot, and for all we can consider, it's a corrupt and outdated and just incompetent organization.
Yeah.
So now Trump's arguing points have shifted to, how can we trust these people to run the country? Why should we trust the Democrats when they can't even run their own caucus?
Oh, yeah.
So in reality, 3 people won. It was the Republicans, Pete won the PR, and Bernie solidified his base and is continuing the momentum of building his revolution.
Yes. And next
or
up,
our revolution.
and next up is New Hampshire, which at this point, I believe their primary is on Monday.
It is on, yeah.
It's on Monday. It's in 3 days.
And there's convoys going up from New Jersey and all over the East Coast to
Yeah.
New Hampshire right now.
Yep.
Volunteers too.
Yep.
Now, Pete, his canvassers are locals and they're paid staffers, but Bernie's canvassers are all volunteers. They fund their own trips. They give carpools for other supporters, and it's the literal grassroots movement. Bernie would be nowhere where he is if it weren't for his supporters and his volunteers, which is amazing.
Actually, I heard through a grapevine that apparently over 2,000 people from out of state went to the Iowa caucus. Can you believe that? 2,000 Bernie supporters from out of state
Went to canvass.
went to canvass for him in Iowa, which is insane.
I mean, I'm thinking of going up to New Hampshire on Saturday too.
That's not a bad idea, honestly.
It's 7 a.m. from Paramus. A convoy leaves. There's like 30 cars bringing people. There's going to be hundreds and hundreds of people going up to New Hampshire from New Jersey.
No, O'Neill, you should. I would, but I'm working over the weekend. But I will guaranteed be phone banking and text banking.
You have Drill?
I'll be guaranteed be phone banking and text banking for Bernie. Yeah, but I have work, unfortunately. So there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the overall message, though, is that Bernie Sanders has proven unequivocally to the Democratic and, hardline population that he is a serious candidate, right? And you can see how the DNC has been shitting themselves trying to sort of twist the Iowa caucus into a to sort of lessen the impact of Bernie's win, right? For example, just right after the Iowa caucus, I already started seeing articles coming out saying like, "Oh, the Iowa caucuses don't matter," whereas for the last year, basically since forever, everybody has always stressed the importance of the Iowa caucus.
Yeah, we can see this blatant hypocrisy within the establishment media. Even MSNBC, the dude, I forget his name. Fuck if I know. But he was reporting on the inaccuracies, and he's like, well, what the fuck is going on? And one of the producers just radioed in his ear and said, cut the feed, stop it. And he had to stop what he was talking about and how MSNBC and AP and the New York Times couldn't call a winner because of the inaccuracies in the vote.
Yeah, they don't want to call it a winner because that would just bring up more Bernie supporters and bring more support for Bernie. But
more than he already has.
Yeah, more than he already has.
He's he raised like 25 million in January, yeah, and Pete's still lagging behind him in total donations, and most of his donations are from big money super PACs.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
well,
let's talk about Pete's supporters and donors.
Oh, the super PACs, yeah.
Not even the super PACs, the individual donors. What sort of people are donating to Pete's campaign? Billionaires.
And Republicans, and
yep.
Totally soulless and devoid of character Harry Potter fans.
Yeah.
That's kind of just people who, all of the millennials and college students that voted for Clinton are the people who are going for Pete now. Basically.
But then I also saw a statistic that just came out today that says that Pete has the highest number of billionaire donors of any candidate.
It's trending on Twitter now, Billionaire Pete, or Pete's Billionaires.
Pete's Billionaires, which just, I guess it just goes to show more of just how, out of touch Pete's campaign is. But
not out of touch. It's very in touch. They're doing everything in the open, and they're doing everything because
open corruption. How about that?
It's open cronyism and corruption. It's so blatant, and it's not even them trying to rig anything. It's just literally what they believe in. It's their whole modus operandi.
Yep. Speaking of which, do you want to go into more details about how Pete tried to rig the Iowa caucus? You showed me your graph before we started recording, and honestly, that thing looks like a madman made it. So why don't you share that?
Oh yeah. So I have screen caps of all of Pete's staffers and the connections they have with the IDP and the DNC and their relation to Pete's campaign, and also screen caps of all the inaccuracies in the data. I'm planning on putting out a 10-minute video just recapping all of the events that have transpired over this week. Probably put it out tomorrow, and do a little voiceover, do a little documentary about it and reportage, just as a resource for people to look at and understand the truth behind what was going on this week.
Okay, but why don't you just give us like a quick little summary? Basically, you know, taking like, I've seen all your shit posts on Facebook and Twitter. Why don't you just give us like a quick summary of how Pete's campaign has basically tried to rig the Iowa caucus?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it rigging, but when you look at Pete's campaign, it's a direct offspring of Hillary Clinton's campaign, right? So Pete is he absorbed a lot of staffers from Hillary's campaign, and it's the same kind of tactics, and it's essentially the DNC establishment running a campaign for their own ideological constructs or reasons.
Sort of like how they basically like created Pete, custom made him in a lab for the campaign.
Yeah. They kind of custom made a Frankenstein all-American faux Republican.
Yep.
A gay veteran, fiscally conservative Harvard graduate from a small town heartland city. And that's essentially the most electable person you could put in office right now. Kind of like Mitt Romney now. He's all of a sudden been absolved of his crimes. Remember when Mitt Romney put his dog on the top of his car?
Or remember our money when he tried to have his kids spell out his name using their teachers, and he accidentally spelled out our money.
Yeah. Oh my God. The 2016 or was that 2012?
No, 2012 election.
Yeah. Oh man, those memes are mint. Like those are some vintage campaign memes.
That's some. Only the true veterans of the
meme
election wars, meme wars will remember this.
I gotta get that hat, veteran of the meme wars.
Veteran of the meme wars. Okay, but go on.
Back to Pete's campaign, and so when you're looking at his campaign, overtly it looks like a semi-grassroots underdog candidate coming to rise up above just all the trials that someone has to go through to be a valid candidate. You know, someone to oppose Joe Biden, who was considered the establishment candidate.
Oh yeah, was considered.
Yeah, was considered.
We'll get back onto that later.
Now he's like crying his eyes. I feel so bad for him now because
we'll get
you see
to
the old
later.
man endearment.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, poor Joe. He's just your grandpa.
Cottage cheese.
Trying
brain.
to set up the Christmas tree, and he needs help.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to him later, though.
But so when you go a little deeper, though, you see all of the different tangents and connections that Pete's staffers have to all of these different shady companies or shadow companies or companies that only go by acronyms, which so speaking of shadow companies, we could talk about the app that the IDP used to
the Iowa caucus app.
Yeah,
right?
the Iowa Democratic Party to caucus their supporters. And so when we to start off, Shadow CEO is called Gerard something. He's essentially irrelevant, but he was an employee of a company called Acronym, who is run by an ex-Hillary staffer who ran Priority USA Super PAC in 2016. And this Super PAC was one of, I think, Hillary's biggest Super PACs. It had one of the bigger donors attached to it. And it was being investigated for some FEC violations for violating campaign finance laws. Because according to campaign finance law, Super PACs cannot coordinate with campaigns. And I feel like that's definitely a bigger issue than Pete so-called rigging the campaign. Because with Shadow, it was decided by Troy a few weeks or months prior, maybe 3 to 4, that they would use only a certain pool of verified third-party apps. And one of these apps was Shadow. And Shadow, the company was chosen to pick this or make this app. And Shadow is a technology company started by Acronym.
Okay.
And what happened was they chose this app, but the app was created for like $40,000 in total, which is absolutely nothing when you talk to like tech experts.
Yeah.
Because just to get through the alpha phase and get it to a beta product, you need like months and months of work to
and months of testing.
Even such a simple app as just tallying votes, because all you need is like a login and like a spreadsheet. So, someone was telling me this. I'm not very
And then a simple math calculator program. Okay, so how long did they test this app before they actually?
6 weeks.
Okay.
About 6 weeks.
In total before they released
total.
it.
And the person who designed the app was Gerard and his 9 staffers in this company. And so you have, and all of these staffers, none of them have a professional background in coding.
Okay. So basically they're all just like DNC Democratic, people who had connections to other Democrats and they use that to their.
Well, yeah, to get to that. But the way the app was made, people got a hold of it. I think it was I forget. I don't have my sources in front of me, but some news company got a hold of the app and they said it was not even past the alpha stages. It was something that someone who just took like a 3-week course on Java would make as their final project. So the app wasn't even designed to work because it used a service that puts out alpha products, and it only had 200 licenses for it. So only 200 people could actually use this app in total.
Oh, really?
Regardless, that's why no one could log into the app afterwards, because it was only licensed for 200 users and 200 testers. And this service that they used, let me think. Yeah. So basically only 200 people could access it out of what, 14,000. I don't have my sources. Out of like almost 2,000 districts.
Yeah, 1,400. So not 2,000 districts.
Yeah, and so
I remember reading articles like before the Iowa caucus starts, and it was just like, oh, the app that people are using to report it is having problems, but don't worry, we'll just use it by phone. And I already remember thinking to myself, oh God, so this is how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Here's how they're going to try and fuck us. But yeah, so basically they release an app that doesn't fucking work. And
it wasn't designed to work either, because it wasn't even an alpha stage.
Yep.
So The Verge posted something about a screenshot from Motherboard from Vice. Mm-hmm. It shows that Shadow used a free tier of a testing platform to distribute this critical mobile app used to caucus Iowa.
Okay.
And it's called Test Fairy, and Shadow didn't even pay for the plan that comes with single sign-on authentication, unlimited data retention, and end-to-end encryption.
Okay.
Instead, it looks like the company used the version of Test Fairy anyone can try for free, which deletes any app data after 30 days and limits the number of test users that can access the app to 200 people.
All right.
So I would assume that a tech company would know how to at least get an app past alpha phase, especially after they were paid by the Iowa Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. But it looks like they didn't even pay for any service to distribute this. Instead, it just feels like the app wasn't even designed to work, because it was impossible for it to work past 200 users. And those 200 users, most of them reported incorrect data being uploaded. So it wasn't a hard-coded, or it wasn't a bug in the code that caused the app to fail.
Maliciously designed to fail.
Well, it's either you're at its total incompetence beyond all levels imaginable, and then we have to ask, why would the IDP hire an incompetent company with no
Nepotism
track record?
Nepotism.
Well, we'll get to that. Mm-hmm. Or it was maliciously designed to fail, and
Yeah.
upload wrong data. Because CNN reported that, even Black Hawk County reported data that contradicted their sheets being uploaded by the app. They took screenshots and uploaded.
Oh yeah,
them to
yeah.
Twitter.
Where someone would say like, "Oh, I put 150 for Bernie Sanders," and it would only put in 98.
Yeah. So there's a bug in the code that takes votes away from Bernie and puts it towards Pete or other people, and it only works to 200 people.
Yeah.
Or it.
So what
These
you're
aren't
saying,
bugs.
So what you're saying is basically either the Democratic Party is completely incompetent and unable to run a campaign, which basically ruins their credibility, or they are maliciously and openly trying to rig the Democratic primary against Bernie Sanders, which also ruins their credibility.
Yeah, and then to go even deeper, the IDP or Troy Price only put out or only selected a handful of companies, and Troy Price was connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign, and it just so happens that
How is he connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign?
he was a staffer on the campaign for 2016. Let me just verify that.
I think that's about right as well. Yeah. So Troy is connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign, and not only is the shadow staffed with Hillary campaigners, it's also staffed with Pete Buttigieg supporters.
So Troy Price was a senior advisor for the Hillary for America from April 2015 to November 2016. And it just so happens that Gerard, the CEO of Shadow, and also the COO and CTO, Chief Technical Officer of Acronym, was a staff on Hillary Clinton's campaign as well in 2016. And then the CEO of Acronym was a chief staffer of Priority USA, the largest super PAC behind Hillary Clinton, or super PAC. Yeah, so Troy, Tara McGowan, Gerard, and a couple other staffers for Pete's campaign are all connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC, or at least the DNC establishment. And specifically, Greta Carnes, Pete's digital organizing, or chief digitally fuck, I can't talk. Fuck. Bleh, bleh. The drinks are getting to me.
That's good.
Maybe.
Drink more.
Yeah, drink more. Okay, but yeah, to go another step deeper, Greta Carnes is Pete's chief digital organizer, and she runs his digital campaigns. But she was also the chief digital organizer for Acronym, Tara McGowan's company. And both of them were staffers on Hillary Clinton's campaign. And specifically, Tara McGowan she was part of Priority USA, the largest super PAC. I think I mentioned this before. But yeah, the largest super PAC for Hillary Clinton, and she was the one. She left it eventually, but the super PAC was being investigated for violating FEC laws. So we see Troy Price and Perez, the chief of the DNC, most of Pete's staffers, all being part of this cabal of DNC establishment members. Even Troy Price was seen. Taking selfies with Tara McGowan.
Yeah, just 2 days before the Iowa caucus.
2 days before the Iowa
her
caucus.
birthday or something like that.
Yeah, with Greta Carnes and Mitchell Hale and Ben Hale. Mitchell Hale is a chief advisor or staffer on Pete's campaign, and Ben Hale is the Iowa director of Pete's campaign. And so he was hanging out with Pete's entire campaign. And he has connections to Pete's campaign from previous jobs. So they put all of these people, part of Hillary's campaign, in power in the DNC. So essentially, it's run by the same people who are running Stop Bernie campaigns. And so there's not much evidence, like specifically, like we haven't have any leaked emails. We don't have any direct contact between them. That
open proof of them saying like, "Hey, let's rig this election."
Yeah, and that's
Bernie.
what people are looking for. But the motive is there, just like with the Iraq War. The motive was there for Bush to lie about the evidence. That's a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy against the Iraq War, or Iraq War conspiracists. With Iran-Contra, Reagan had the motive to lie about the CIA's involvement with Colombian drug cartels and right-wing Nicaraguan militias. And even with Watergate or the Gulf of Tonkin, Lyndon B. Johnson had the motive to lie about this. And there was evidence, but there was no overt proof.
Yes, because it's a conspiracy.
That's exactly,
You're never going to have overt, like they're not going to write down, hey, let's have a conspiracy to bring down Bernie Sanders, because that's proof against them. Conspiracies are done by word of mouth. That's how they work. Word of mouth, shadow and smoke and mirrors. That's how they always worked, and that's how they're always going to. And even if, the Pete Buttigieg campaign didn't openly plan, directly plan to sabotage the Bernie Sanders campaign, the motive for them to ruin Bernie Sanders and encourage Pete to win is still there, which is why, and there was a recent graph that was just released where they showed, moments during the caucus, which candidates had the most SDEs go against them in terms of errors, which motives had, in terms of discrepancies, which candidates gained the most, and which candidates lost the most. Pete Buttigieg gained the most through these arrows, and Bernie Sanders lost the most. Yeah,
this is all by independent investigators. Yeah. People on Twitter, they were running scripts on the data pools, and they showed almost all of the errors took candidates away from Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Biden, and also gave candidates or SDE points to Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
So the app was essentially coded to do that, because with bugs, that's not a bug, that's hard coded.
Yeah.
So it was either a fault or it was hard coded to do this.
Yep.
You don't make a mistake like that.
Like one or two caucuses doing that is fine.
You can be incompetent enough to make that code, but they're like machines. Like your car doesn't like the engine doesn't kill you, it doesn't shoot you in the fucking face.
Or your car might veer to the right. But if your car might veer to the right, and that might be a manufacturing error. But if your car veers to the right every single time there's another car towards it, or if your car somehow always veers to the right whenever you're on a bridge, that's not an error. That's
not a bug.
Blatant.
It's a feature.
Yeah, that's a feature of it, and that's just your car trying to kill you.
It's like, to be more specific with like Adobe, like their inability to encode proxies properly from third-party software. Originally, that's a bug, but now it's a feature.
Yep.
Like these are flaws in the program that, like they're not mistakes you make in coding.
Yeah,
they're things that are hard coded into it.
Yep, exactly. But let's take a step back from the just blatant corruption going on.
But I want to make that point, though, because it's blatant corruption. But the biggest thing people have to take away from this is not that Pete rigged the election, but that there is a motive to put people in power. And this is a question of who gets to sit in the seats of power, not a question of who is conniving behind the scenes.
Yep.
It's a question of all of the relationships and the social relationships between these leaders, and who gets to decide who sits in power and who makes the decisions.
Or put more simply, the DNC has a motivation to place certain candidates in certain positions of power, and Bernie Sanders is not their candidate that they want to put in power, which is bullshit, because the DNC is supposed to be a democratic institution. It's supposed to be democratically listened, putting whoever the people want in power, or as according to our Constitution, power comes from the people.
Well, see, hypocritically, there's paradoxically, the DNC is a private corporation, and they can decide for whatever they want what goes on in their party. But the material facts of the DNC is that it's a party of the United States, and these are the people who run our democratic process. They own our politics, or the mechanisms of our political society. And through that, by being constitutionally not applicable to the Constitution. There's no constitutional bylaws regarding the DNC, and it's a private institution. They can decide for themselves what candidates to run.
Yeah. It's kind of fucked up. I mean, well, obviously the Constitution didn't ever plan for an institution like the DNC or the RNC.
Just private parties.
Yeah. So, but let's take a step back from all of that, right? I think we've thoroughly analyzed the corruption within the Iowa caucus. Whether or not there was blatant rigging, there's at the very least motivation within the DNC to put certain candidates in power against Bernie Sanders.
And the mechanisms of the DNC and how they
Yep.
operate don't operate in a way
That's democratic.
That's democratic. The fundamental nature of the DNC is undemocratic.
Yes.
And speaking of which, the ex-CEO of the DNC is Pete's senior advisor. Isn't that a little bit sketchy?
Yeah.
I mean, like the CEO, the chief executive officer of the DNC is running Pete's campaign. I mean, everyone who runs the DNC is running Pete's campaign. It seems a little too obvious, the evidence there, that he's not a grassroots candidate. He is a candidate chosen by the DNC.
Yeah.
Because all of his senior advisors and staffers are the DNC.
Exactly.
His campaign
They're all
is the
establishment
DNC.
Democrats.
And it's not like overt. Like they don't have like a constitution that says Pete is our candidate. It's the social connections and the material mechanisms behind the campaign that operate in tune with the DNC.
Yeah. And, well, you and I and basically all the people on the internet, we're the outliers, right? Because we spend way more time invested in politics than the average person does, right? So we see these corruptions and we see the connections that are there. But I think the most frustrating aspect of being in the know is trying to convince the average Democrat or American who doesn't really get involved with politics that this corruption and this rigging is happening, right? And for the past week, I've been trying, in our local Monroe Township politics page, trying to convince people that this rigging is going on. And it's like trying to talk to someone and all they do is just simply say, they just cross their arms and they just say, nope, it's not happening.
You're
I don't
just
believe
angry your candidate didn't win. Well, no, we're angry that there's a conspiracy against our candidate by the Democratic establishment.
Not even that, it's just against our democracy.
Yeah, just democracy in general. Our actual political institution is conspiring against our candidate.
Yeah, which, and it's not just
Not even candidate, our movement, our ideology.
Exactly. That's the purpose.
It's a conflict of ideologies.
Exactly. Bernie Sanders the movement doesn't just start and end with Bernie Sanders. It's a movement of the people, right? And the fact that we keep pointing out that Bernie Sanders is the most electable because he has the most contribution, he's got the most enthusiastic followers, he's got the most, the most number of people who show up for his campaigns and the most number of highest number of volunteers and the popular vote. None of that matters to them because they just simply, what's the fucking phrase that they've drank the Kool-Aid so much that their brains have become Kool-Aid. If you look inside their heads, they don't have brains anymore. It's just Kool-Aid powder.
Well, their argument for winning the election and the presidency, they presuppose power and ideology for actual policy. So, sorry, Bert. They're hell-bent on beating Trump. That is their only goal. So that's why they're running a Republican, Pete Buttigieg, or someone who's putting himself out there as a Republican, a gay Republican. They're pretty much running Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're putting progressivism and policy behind pragmatism and blind power.
Yeah.
So their only goal and their only imperative is power. They don't have any imperative behind policy or changes in our current conditions. Their only motive is to defeat Trump.
Yep.
And so by rejecting any kind of progressive movement or changes in our current conditions, they're only putting more power behind the status quo. They're only abetting the status quo. They're only regurgitating the status quo.
Yep. And you know what the most frustrating aspect is? They want to beat Trump, right? But they're making the exact same mistakes that Hillary Clinton's campaign made in 2016, where they don't want to run a leftist-leaning candidate because they're worried that it won't be applicable to the majority of Americans. But you know who lost? The mainstream moderate Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton. So they're just making this exact same mistakes again.
Now they shift further to the right by running Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Or Pete Rat.
Pete Rat, Pete
Butt.
Mayo Pete,
Mayo
whatever the
Pete
fuck
Butt.
his name is. But here's the frustrating part. It's like all they care about is beating Trump, right? So it's gotten to the point now where I've basically said, fuck it. Either you vote for Bernie Sanders or I'm not voting in the next election that's happening.
Yeah, no one's going to vote.
Yeah, because if you don't vote, if Bernie doesn't get it, his 30, 40 million supporters are basically just going to boycott the Democratic presidency.
I think
campaign.
they're going to launch a general strike. That's what we need to organize.
Or it's going to, you know what else is going to happen? Either
Yellow
we're not
vest
going to
for Bernie.
vote. Either we're not going to vote in the presidential election that happens, or we're just going to run a third-party candidate, and the Democratic Party is going to be split. And I've basically stopped trying to argue with them based on logical reasons for why you should vote for Bernie, and I've basically resorted to just simply saying, vote for Bernie, or we're not voting in at all, and then you're going to lose the candidacy. And because if all they care about is beating Trump, then my God, I will put a gun to your head and force you to vote for Bernie. Vote for Bernie, or you will lose to Trump again.
Just as they apply their mechanisms for power, we shall apply the same mechanisms back.
And they get so angry when you do that, because what they always expect the leftists to give in to the more moderate side, right? Go right, but they never expect the moderate Democrats to go towards the leftists. But fuck that. Vote for Bernie Sanders or you will lose, because I will not support you. I will not canvass. I will not talk about the election.
Exactly.
I will not vote on that day. And if you lose, then that is on your fault.
And so this shift to the right just highlights their complacency with the ideological hegemony that operates in America. And so this gradual shift away from this ideological hegemony for a new power and a new ideology and a new policy just shows how inept they are and how draconian their policies are.
They're just out of touch with what modern Americans want.
And it shows their true motives too. They're neoliberals. They want to do is regurgitate the current status quo and just hold power. So the moment something comes to conflict the ideological hegemony in America, they reject that and instead shift further to conforming to the current status quo.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing people have to realize, is that they are not our allies. They are not our friends. They are the true enemy, is the people who reject the new movement and reject the new wave and instead fall further into the right and further into the fascistic talking points that Trump puts out. Instead of allying with the new movement and the new revolution, they instead ally with Trump's allies only to put their own candidates in the seat of power.
Exactly. And it gets even worse is that they don't understand that the tides have changed. The tides and the times have changed. Young people overwhelmingly support Bernie Sanders, and the DNC and the Democratic Party
not even Bernie
essentially
Sanders, just socialism in general.
leftism,
the anti-capitalism.
They can't wrap their heads around that because they don't want to lose their power. So they would rather lose the election and have Donald Trump be reelected and keep their power, because the people who control the Democratic Party are also billionaires, and they will win. No matter if Pete Buttigieg wins or Donald Trump wins, the billionaire class will still win.
Nothing changes for us and for the majority of Americans in the working class, because the same people behind the Trump campaign are the same people behind the Buttigieg campaign.
Yes.
The same mechanisms behind the Trump campaign, all the shady super PACs and Frankenstein political organizations are also operate Pete's campaign, like Acronym, for example. Tara McGowan purposely in her podcast stated, we designed Acronym around Cambridge Analytica and Trump's super PACs in order to combat Trump using the same mechanisms he uses to run his campaign. So we're seeing Democrats or the Democratic establishment in terms of the American party system transform themselves into a homunculus of right wing and left wing, a true right wing moderate party is forming, and the left wing of America has
It's
rejected
non-existent.
that.
We're just
Well, we've rejected that. We've consolidated our own party now. We have our own senators, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar. We have our own movement. We have our own party. We have our own new ideology to combat the rest of America.
And essentially at this point, either we take over the Democratic Party with our radical with apostrophes, leftists, right? Or quotation marks around radical leftists, or we simply start our own party. Maybe the Bull Moose Party. Hell yeah. Bull Moose Party of Teddy Roosevelt.
Bull Moose.
And
he was the
Bull Moose Party. We'll revamp him, make it our own. But he's a third party, and that we split the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but
either way, this is a win for leftism. Because it has come to the point where the Democratic Party has essentially only represents upper crust, college educated leftists, rich Democrats.
Yeah, basically. I saw a statistic about this. Like 6% of American billionaires support Pete's campaign.
Yeah, and only
1% of Latinos and 0% of Black Americans.
Yeah. Pete Buttigieg literally has a higher percentage of billionaires supporting his campaign than minority populations,
and
right?
The working class Americans.
Look at Bernie Sanders' campaign. It's a wide variety of people from all races, from all social classes and networks and all education levels. Bernie Sanders is the American candidate. And that's the thing that people don't understand. And that's what scares them. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of these leftists, a lot of these upper class Democrats, they look down on people of color. They look down on poor people because they might say that they support you, but secretly deep down, they hate you. They don't like you. They think you're scum. And they think you're too dumb to vote. And
too dumb or too poor.
Too dumb or too poor.
Just like it with the IDP, as soon as the satellite caucuses and the mosques and the unions and the Latinos started to come out and vote, they said, no, we're recanvassing only your districts.
Yes.
They've forsaken the minority vote and the union vote and the working class vote in order to skew Pete's standings and put out a new number for the vote.
Recanvass a new number. And, it's at the very least, the Republicans, at least they're open and honest about the fact that they hate poor people. Like, we're a party of rich people. Fuck you. Yeah, that's who we are. You know what? I can respect that.
The true fascists are the neoliberals. And what we see now with the Democratic Party is a fissure in the American left.
Yes.
So now I think this is the first time in 100 years that a new party is forming. So the Democratic Party has gone the ways of the old. They have become the new Republicans. They've gone
the way of the Whig Party.
The Whig Party, yeah. So now a new party is forming, a new pseudo-revolutionary left party. I'm just going to say revolutionary left because Bernie's campaign is a revolutionary campaign because his campaign's not a campaign. It's a movement of the American working class. And this is where the party lines are drawn. A new party for the working class and of the working class of Americans is forming. And that's what's beautiful about Bernie's campaign. And that's why we have to use every ounce of our energy to fight for this movement.
Yes. And this is the best chance that we've had since Eugene V. Debs ran in 100 years ago.
Yeah,
and
even McGovern wasn't as...
Yeah, and he... Sorry, let me finish this.
Yeah.
Eugene V. Debs ran on the Socialist Party ticket 100 years ago, and he didn't come nearly as close as we have come today.
And that's when the Wobblies and the unions were still relevant before the union busters. And that's when we used to have massive strikes across the country and wars between unions. That's when the American military bombed Blair Mountain and Ludlow was massacred. We're bringing back those days of the redneck.
Yes. And I think that at the end of it all, something needs to change. Our political situation
is changing.
Well, yes, we've gone to a situation where change is inevitable. Our political situation has become so untenable, so precarious that either, something will have to change within our political climate. And we're still seeing attacks on unions to this day. Every time a state or city government gives into Amazon's demands so that Amazon will set up a warehouse in their location, they are hurting union prospects. Every time the state lets Amazon basically illegally, fire workers or manipulate workers or not create conditions for workers to unionize, they're damaging it. Every time the state does not support, union strikes or workers' rights, or passes laws that hurt the ability for workers to pay for their family or put food on the table, they're hurting unions.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that, Americans are once again having not a religious awakening, but a political awakening of class consciousness. And
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we're finally, this is the new red wave,
Yeah.
not a Republican wave.
I really appreciate that too. That people are becoming more conscious of their current lived conditions or their lived experiences, and they're becoming more aware of that. Nonetheless,
And I think that it's Bernie Sanders is basically the symptom of such a movement, right? But the movement doesn't end with Bernie Sanders. He's just the first step. Even if he gets elected president, it's not over. We have to elect local, state, and level officials. It starts within the small towns. It starts within the local elections, on the boards of education. It has to be a complete sweep of the political climate, right?
yeah, and I appreciate Bernie's campaign for that too, because everywhere people are running under the guise of like being a Bernie bro. It's like a new political class now. It's like the Bernie bro or a new political party.
Yeah, the Dem Sox, basically. But I think the most important thing, though, is that we actually had a really good conversation with a friend last night about the political revolution, right? And as communists, as leftists in America, she asked us, she basically said, I'm not going to participate in Bernie as much as I support him because I don't think that his revolution, will bring about communism. And I think, her and I's opinions about communism in America are radically different. She believes that communism is possible in America, and whereas I believe that at the most that we as communists can do in America is weaken the grip of American imperialism on the world through programs such as Bernie Sanders. Because I believe that even if the global communist revolution happens, America will be the last to fall because it is the heart of capitalism.
Yeah, it's the imperial core. So all we can do really is just alleviate its grip on the rest of the world.
Yes, exactly. To use a Star Wars analogy, the revolution, the Rebel Alliance, mostly in the Outer Rim, the core systems are heavily controlled by the Empire, right? They're very pro-Empire. The same way the Communist Revolution happens in America, which, by the way, little sidetrack, but who's the guy who wrote Star Wars? I suddenly just
George Lucas.
Yeah, George Lucas said that the inspiration for the rebels started from the Viet Cong.
Yeah, he based it off of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, so I think that it's a good analogy for today as well. The revolutions start in the fringes of society, the places where America's grip on the world is the least, or is the weakest, or where it is the most heavily felt.
Yeah,
right? The places that are the most
100%.
oppressed have the biggest reasons for movements that grant nationalistic power and end poverty and American imperialism and are against imperialism. Whereas the people who benefit from the imperialism are the ones that are going to inevitably, of course, support it, because supporting the imperialism supports their way of life. And people don't like to give up their 24-hour McDonald's drive-throughs if it means they're not willing to support capitalism and stop a child from suffering. Sorry, not support capitalism. They're not willing to support communism and socialism and stop a child from having his hands cut off in the diamond mines of Nigeria if it means that they have to give up, I don't know, their fucking newest iPhone.
Yeah, and then people have to be aware of that too, which I feel like one of the biggest things people can do is just, I guess, join the information war, essentially, and just disseminate media, and just trying to raise the consciousness of other Americans. Because, I mean, at least like with Americans, I think I was telling our friend this, but like the way we experience politics and the way we experience power is wholly different than the way the rest of the world experiences and lives with, the lived experience with political power.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an overt violent experience, and so people are really going to respond to overt violence and overt violence in rejection to that.
Yeah.
Or in reaction to that.
Yeah. And, you know, in a way, the movement away from violence, right, within the American political institution is a good thing, but it is also a bad thing, right? Because like you said, it's bad because now that violence has basically become a taboo subject, at least overt violence has become a taboo subject, the average citizens are less likely to resort to it. They reject anything that, you know, as long as they just, you know, the communism and socialism is politicized as this violent revolution, they're not going to support it. On the other hand, you know, 100 years ago, Democrats, you know, it's Democrat Party and the Republican Party were basically just beating up communists openly on the streets. And now, you know, or they would just send in the National Guard to shoot up everybody, shoot up union meetings. And now, you know, what's the most the Democratic Party could do when Bernie Sanders was about to win Iowa? Shit their fucking pants and burn the entire Iowa caucus
It's
down.
a soft power, but it's an all-encompassing soft power.
Yes, exactly. It's a more insidious soft power.
I think Camus said this, but if life's the ultimate end, then murder, and death is the ultimate wrong. And that's why he was hesitant or wholly rejected violent revolutions across the world, because, like, especially with like neoliberal ideology, it's violence and murder is just complete wrong and should never be a means to achieving power. Everything should be based off, I guess, concessions and what is it?
Compromise?
Yeah, compromise. Yeah, based off of compromise.
Except those compromises you'll find, especially in neoliberalism. I think J-Reg does it really well. You know, he's a fucking memer, but he, in his video series, he puts it really well where neoliberalism, anything is okay under neoliberalism as long as it's consensual, even if that consent is manufactured and forced upon people. Because a desperate worker, you know, you don't need to force workers to work. We don't need to have slave labor anymore when we can willingly, you know, force people to have to work for us, and they have to accept their living conditions, and they have to accept basically any scraps we give them, as the capitalist class gives them, because the alternative is just starvation on the streets.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, and a drowning person will grab onto that anchor, you know. So I think that's what's happening to the American populace.
I guess to put this metaphor in like a lens applicable to, I guess, like the third world and colonized nations, it's the difference between someone who's standing by and watching you drown or someone who's actively drowning you.
Yes.
And what you're going to fight against and fight for.
And, you know, in those situations where the person is just watching you drown, they are just as responsible for your drowning as the person who is physically drowning you.
Yeah. Or maybe they're a business owner whose dock failed.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just fell into the water, but they're not like actively drowning you, you know?
So I think MLK actually does a really good job as well, saying that we're, when he was
about, like the milquetoast liberals.
Yes.
Or like how, what's his name?
Milquetoast liberals.
Yeah, the milquetoast liberals. Yeah. So what were you saying about MLK?
No, in his letter to Birmingham jail, I think I talked about this last week, right? In letter to a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. basically says that the person that he hates the most isn't the right winger, you know, the right wing conservative of the KKK. They're not the ones that are the most damaging to his movement. It's the moderate liberal who always says, you know, I support what you're doing and I think your message is great, but I just don't approve of your methods, and it's just not the right time for you to be doing this right now. And it's always wait, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, arguing with people on the internet and a lot of these older Democrats who've been in the Democratic establishment and have basically had their brains turned into solid Kool-Aid powder, that's what they say. That's just what spews out of their mouth every single time you try to talk to them.
Yeah.
It's just not the good time. We just really need to beat Trump, and that's all that matters. Not the person, not the policies of the person, but just having someone who's electable. That's why they support Joe Biden, and you saw how fucking badly that failed.
Yeah, and then the electability is shifting way more left than they would really like to realize.
Exactly.
Cornel West, I think, calls them milquetoast liberals.
Milquetoast liberals.
Yeah,
I like that.
Especially Pete Buttigieg. Apparently, he was best friends with his dad too. Like he was at Pete Buttigieg's baby shower. Was like changing his diapers, which is so weird to think.
God, how did fucking Buttigieg go so wrong?
Yeah, like how do you go from being raised on Gramsci to being just a milquetoast neoliberal?
To being a CIA operative.
Yeah, it's... And apparently he wrote a senior thesis on Bernie Sanders too as a model of integrity, which is like, it's... I don't know how people get this so far deeply embedded in like the establishment and neoliberal politics. It's insane like how he can go from being raised with virtue and being a virtueless son.
Yeah. I think because he used to, as a kid, dress up as the president and pretend and want to be the president. It's basically been his life stream since he was like a little child.
The president cosplay.
Yeah, he would like cosplay as the president. So I think that in his mind, in his head, as long as he becomes president, it doesn't matter. So, I think that he just simply looked at it analytically and he said, well, my best chance to become president is to play the game, become the ultimate Democrat, lie, cheat, steal my way to the top.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
Why would you go through officer school? Did he go through officer school? He only went through like 2 months of it, I think, rather than the 13 weeks or whatever.
So what happens is that after he finished college, then he went through officer school, and basically you go through basic, like any enlisted person, basic school, with the drill sergeants and everything, and then you go through what's known as OCS, Officer Candidacy School, and that's like a compressed, it's a compressed officer school, and where they teach you all the basics of it. And, really, he only did that so that he could add that to his resume. Why?
He was only in the Army or the Navy for 2 years as a reservist.
I thought he was, MI, reserve. And I think he was with the Navy as well. So
yeah, and I think his training was expedited because, he was good with intelligence. So they needed his skill set. Mm-hmm. I mean, he might as well have been like a non-commissioned officer.
Yeah, basically. So but Pete Buttigieg, I don't know. I'm very disappointed with him. He had all the potential of being like the chosen one, but look at what's happened to him. He's just become milquetoast neoliberalism. All right, well, this podcast has been going on long enough. I'm feeling pretty pooped today.
We're ready to wrap it up. My name's O'Neill, and this is Lee Chen over here.
Hello, and this is Red Star Radio. Thank you for listening to us.
All right,
we are now in the double digits for our podcast.
Yeah, we're episode 11, I think.
Soon we'll become a moody teenager of a podcast.
Yeah.
Unprofessional. Soon we'll become a moody teenager of a podcast. After that, then we'll go through our weird anarchist phase as well. Mm-hmm. And then we'll suddenly become a right-wing podcast.
And then we'll go to school, and then we'll become an educational podcast.
An educational podcast. And then after we go through school and college and we have to find a job, then we'll swing right back to communism.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for listening.
This government had an idea and Parliament made it law. Seems like it's illegal to fight for the union anymore. And which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? We set off to join the picket lines, but together we cannot fail. We got stopped by police at the county line. They said, go home, boys, or you'll go into jail. And which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Well, it's hard to explain to a crying child why her daddy won't go back. So the family suffer, but it hurts me more to hear a scab say, sod you, Jack. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Well, I'm bound to follow my conscience, and I'll do whatever I can. But it'll take much more than a union law to knock the fight out of a working man. And which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side?